This is kind of, I had a PowerPoint running here, and I hope everybody kind of just glanced at it as we went through today's sessions. I didn't have this yesterday. I actually created this last night, thinking that it would be a little bit helpful just to give everybody an idea of the several areas we're going to cover today over the next hour, within the system. At any point during the system, what we'll do is, we'll pause and we'll take any questions that come up. We do ask that on the panel, the webinar panel in the lower right-hand corner, you can type in your questions. And then, like I said, at various points throughout today's presentation, we'll come back and we'll answer those questions so everybody has a good idea what's going on within the system. Also, too, I would like to say that one of the things that's on my webinar, if I could just get my slide to go here, these are some of the terms that I'm going to kind of go over today. LGS is going to refer to local government services, which is the DCA. LGEs, which stand for local government entities, will be yourself, so municipal clerks, counties, colleges, JIFs, so on and so forth. LGO will represent the local government officials. Those will be the people that will have to file the FDS, which we're going to talk about as the financial disclosure statement. So typically, as I go through the training here, I do use those acronyms instead of the full name and so on and so forth. So the system I'm going to be working in today is the test system. The live system, we're still doing some tweaks to the live system. We're expecting to go live with the system within the next 2 weeks. An official date has not been established yet, but you should see some communication from Chris and his office within the next week or so, the official date that this is going to go live. I will preempt, and I will tell you that one of the questions that has come up multiple times yesterday is, has the deadline been extended? And I will speak for Chris here. As of right now, the deadline right now has been extended to May 15th, but that could change as well too. But Chris, I know will probably relate or allude to that a little bit later as we go through some of the questions. So again, just so everybody's aware of that, I'll let that be known up front. So everybody who's going to be utilizing the system, whether it's the LGSs, the DCA, whether it's you, the LGEs, even the LGOs, are going to come to the same login screen. Once we have the URL, the live site up and running, a URL or web address will be communicated with you, along with your username and a password or a temporary password to access the system. Chris and his staff are going through a list of all entities. They're compiling email addresses, and I'm going to set up temporary passwords, and that information, again, will be relayed to you once we establish a go-live date. So within the next couple of weeks, you'll be receiving that information as well, too. A couple of things. This is a web-based system, so as long as you have a computer with Internet access, you'll be able to utilize the system. We do have some system requirements that we've listed here on this login page down at the bottom. Basically, a Windows PC, an Apple Mac, browsers. This is browser independent, so whether you use Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, or Chrome, you should be able to use the system. We do recommend that you either enable your pop-ups and allow cookies, because there are certain times within the system that pop-ups will occur, so you'll just want to make sure that you add the web address as a trusted site in your pop-up blockers, or just turn pop-up blockers off overall. And then we also ask you that you have, at a minimum, Adobe Reader or some type of PDF viewing software, because we do produce, especially the FDS form, is a PDF copy. So again, we ask that you have that information available, or that software on your machine to do that. So that being said, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to log into the system as an LGE, and I'm going to talk mainly municipal clerks, since that's the majority of the participants we have on the call are municipal clerks. But again, if you work for a JIF or a county, ethics board, local college or whatever, don't take any offense. It's just I'm using municipalities as kind of my demo here. So I refer to municipal clerks mainly as I go through my demo. So before I actually log in, and we'll see the login screen here, the one thing that does come up on occasion, especially next year when you go to use the system, and it's been a year since you last used the system, hopefully not, but we'll see, is people tend to forget their password from time to time. So to make it real simple, on the login screen in the lower right-hand corner of the login box, we do have a link there that says Forgot Password. And if you click on that link and you type in an email address, as long as it's a valid email address that's on the system, your password will be emailed to that email address. So again, if you have access to that email address, the current password will be emailed to you. So, if I come in here and I just put in any email address and I hit Get Password, if that email address is not a valid email address on the system, again, a password will not be sent to that email. It has to be a valid email address in order for that to occur. So if I put in my correct email address and not my incorrect one, and I hit Get Password, then the system will actually let me know that a password has been emailed to that email address, right? So I should check that email, and I should have my password for the system. So I just wanted to show everybody that first, that if you do happen to forget your password, that's how you would actually go ahead and retrieve that password. So I'm going to log into the system. Now I'm going to be working between two towns today, just to show you the normal flow. I'm going to be working with Edison Township. That happens to be my hometown. So I know I had somebody out from Edison yesterday, and a couple things came up, and I was picking on them a little bit, but just want to talk about that, and South Brunswick Township. Those are the two townships that I actually have set up in the system right now for testing purposes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as an LGE, okay, or municipal clerk, into the system, right? So I'm going to log into the system with my username, and I'm going to log in with my password. Hit the login button. And that's going to take me into this first screen, which we call the home screen. Now, I want to point out a couple of things on this screen first as we go through. Just so everybody's aware of different things on this screen. So let me do this. Let me get my little pointer here so we can kind of my spotlighter. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, right now it says Cheryl Rusamano. That's the clerk in Edison Township. Again, your name will appear up in that upper right-hand corner when you first log into the system. And then it will also tell you the entity that you're logging in as. In this case, I'm logging into Edison Township in County of Middlesex. If you were logging in as a college, let's say Middlesex County College, then it would say Middlesex County College. Right below that, there is a logout link. There are a couple different ways to log out of the system or be logged out of the system. One is, since this is a browser, you can just click on that link right there, the logout link, and it'll log you out of the system. You can click on the red X in the upper right-hand corner up here to close the browser. That will log you out of the system as well, too. And the third way is that if you're logged into the system and you haven't had any activity for a period of time, the system's been inactive, from a security standpoint, the system will automatically log you out of the system. So again, those are the different ways that you can either log out or be logged out of the system. We also provide this top bar here, which is kind of a status bar. So it's going to tell you, what the current submission year is. We're in 2014. When we move into 2015 next year, the DCA will be responsible for actually changing the system over from year to year. So, if you log in, let's say January 1st, okay, not that everybody's working on New Year's Day, but if you log in January 1st and you still see 2014, it just tells you that the system hasn't been turned over yet to the new year. So next year, you just want to wait until this submission year says 2015 to allow your LGOs to submit for the, to submit for the new year. LGO rosters, it basically tells you how many different positions you have set up on your roster, and we'll get a little bit more into the rosters in a couple of seconds. Okay, and then how many FDS submissions have there been? Okay, so we see that there's been 4 submissions for my roster 4. So basically everybody has submitted an FDS that's on my roster. Down below you're going to have some icons here with some links below them, like Manage LGO Roster, Reports, and then this Edit Local Government and Entity Profile. So when you first get your username and your password from the DCA, the first thing or the first time that you log into the system, what we're going to ask you to do is go in and change your password, okay, because you're going to be provided with a temporary password. We ask that you go into this link right here where it says Edit a Local Government Entity Profile, okay? And when you go into that link, we ask that you review the information that's in there and correct any of the information, okay, if it's wrong, like maybe the zip code, phone number, website, and so on and so forth. Or if there's information missing, you can actually enter that in. Same thing down below. We will have the information that initially was set up from DCA of who the contact person is and the email address that was created. But the last two fields in this section down below are the password fields, okay? So this is where we're going to ask you to go in and actually change that password, that temporary password that was given to you. The way to do that is just clear out the fields that are here, okay, and then put in a new password following the guidelines that are listed below. So basically, your password needs to be between 8 and 16 characters in length, and your password needs to contain at least one letter and one number in that password, okay? So I'll come in here and I'll just put in, I'm just going to put in 4 digits here for right now, right? I'm just going to skirt that requirement that's there, okay? And if I go to hit save, okay, what the system's going to do, the system's going to give me a warning that it doesn't meet the requirements of, the password, right? So again, I will need to go in here and I'll need to actually put in a valid password in order for that to be valid. And once I do that and I click save at the bottom of the screen here, okay, what I should get is a message up in top or even at the bottom of the screen in green that tells me my operation has been successful. So within our system, anytime an operation is successful, we always give a message back to you in green, okay? But, for example, if I, let's say, took a digit off the phone number here by accident, and I clicked on save, what you'll see is you'll have a message up in top in red letting you know that there's an operation that failed, okay? So anytime an operation fails, the message will always be in red. Anytime a message is, or an operation is successful, that message will always be in green. So just make sure that when you hit save, you look at your message, you make sure that that message is green and the operation should be successful. So again, that's the first thing that we're going to ask you to do when you first log into the system is just come in here and change that password. So I'm going to click on the home button. That's going to take me back out to my home screen, which I said this is the home screen right here, okay? And let's talk about now the LGO roster. Basically, with the LGO roster, I know last year, as Chris had kind of mentioned to everybody, especially at the municipal clerk seminar a couple of weeks ago, the LGO roster was kind of done at the end of the process and submitted, to the DCA. Now, with the system now, is the LGO roster is actually going to be initiated or needs to be done right up front. That's going to be what starts this entire process. Now, we do realize that since this is a new system, first year there's going to be work that needs to be done to create these rosters. I know one of the questions had come up about, well, what about our rosters from last year? Could those things be, pulled over or migrated over? And, after, taking a look, after taking a look at the data and so on and so forth, it was really decided that the integrity of the data just didn't, it wasn't good enough to bring over or migrate over. A decision was made that everybody would basically just start and just create their rosters from scratch. So, but the good news to this is that when we go into next year, since your rosters were already done, really next year all you're doing is maintenance. All you're doing is adding anybody new that has to file an FDS to your roster, and anybody that it no longer applies to that maybe has left and so on and so forth. Those people then you just remove from your roster next year. So you don't have to create the entire roster year after year after year. It's just going to be the first year that you actually have to create that roster. So again, just wanted to let you know, based on that. So that being said, so let me pause there real quick. Let me just see if I have any questions that I can answer.
And Mark, what I'm doing now, I'm going to give everybody the first code word.
Sure.
Where are we here? Okay, so the first code word is Poppy, P-O-P-P-Y. Poppy, P-O-P-P-Y.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So hopefully everybody got that first keyword. Okay, so a couple of questions that came up. I have 2 questions here that are very similar, so I'll answer those 2 first. It says, can the municipal clerk and the deputy clerk have login credentials and passwords? Right now, there's only going to be one username and one password for each entity. It's something that we're going to look at possibly for next year to see if there could be multiple, but right now it's only going to be just one username and password per entity. If and that's going to be normally sent to the municipal clerks in the municipalities, and again, we'll have to see who that information goes to in the other entities. But you can share that username and password with somebody else. So if somebody else within your organization is responsible for managing the FDS process, you can obviously share that username and password, with them at that point in time. So, but for this year, unfortunately, no. It's only going to just be one username and one password per entity. It is something that has come up. It'll be something that we'll probably look at next year as an option. Can't guarantee it, but it'll be something that has come up, and we'll talk about for next year. Another question that came up real quick. It says, in my town, LGOs are not computer savvy. Can I fill out their FDS forms from the computer using the town computer? Can you discuss that? Chris, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to talk about that?
I'll chime in. You could certainly do that. There's kind of two variations, at least two variations on that. One variation would be where you have a local government officer who's an old-timer, let's say. They tell you they don't have a computer, they don't have email. The scenario for those folks is the burden is on them to find a way to comply with this. Family members. I did my father's form for him last year. He's not very computer savvy. He hand wrote it, and it took me all 2 minutes to type the data in and submit. It wasn't a heavy lift for me. But in the scenario where it's just a computer problem, the local government officer says, I don't have a personal computer at my house. Those people are part of your community family, your local government family. And personally, I can see no reason why you couldn't afford them the use of a personal computer at town hall or wherever your offices are, to let them, sit down on the computer and do what's got to get done. The other variation is literally, I suppose, what this question posed is, can I do the form for them? The level to which you want to be involved in preparing somebody's financial disclosure statement as a local government entity representative is up to you. I'll say that you need to be very cautious, however. Realize that if you're filling a form out for somebody and down the road there's an ethics complaint because somebody forgot to list, the vacation home somewhere, that local government officer is probably going to be pointing the finger at you, saying, well, I didn't fill it out. He or she filled it out for me, and put you in a bind. And I think that's something you need to be cautious about. On the other hand, having worked for local government for many years, I know that it's not always easy to tell your local government officers, especially the mayors and council people, no. But we have to leave that up to you to make those determinations. But from a technical perspective, can you do this? Yeah, I mean, you'd be issuing the initial PIN number and username to this person, but you would be logging on as if you are that particular local government officer. You won't be able to do that from your administrative screen. You physically have to log out and log in as that particular person.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and the comment that the person made who asked the question says, then what they'll do is they'll just kind of have the LGO sit with them by the computer and kind of just show them what they need to do, but the LGO will still complete the information. So okay, so let's continue on here. So I answered the questions up to this point, most of them. There's a couple there I'll get to a little bit later. Okay, so how do we manage our roster? So you'll click on the link here that says Manage LGO Roster, okay? And when this next screen comes up, what you'll see is you'll actually see your current roster that you have, okay? So we've, from the couple training sessions we've done so far, you can kind of see that I have a roster already built, or I'm in the process of building my roster right here. What you'll notice also, too, is in my roster, you'll see people's name listed twice. Like if we look at the first two entries, that says Samuel Adams, then we have one for Robert Smith, then we have two for myself, Mark Semple, one for Mike Williams. Basically, when you see the same name multiple times, it means within that entity or organization, they've had several positions that required them to fill out an FDS. So for like Samuel Adams, you see that he's had the position of councilman, and he's also been a planning board member. Myself, I had set up a CFO and a planning board member, right, which all requires an FDS to be filed. So again, as we go through here, I'll show you how we, add multiple positions if that applies to a particular person. Since I am talking about our search grid right here, a couple of things I just want to point out too. We're looking at a search grid right now that only has 7 entries on it, or 6 entries on it. I'm sorry, but as we go through, especially the larger towns or cities, I mean, you could literally have hundreds of people on this grid, right? And you might want to search or sort that grid certain ways. So there's a couple different ways. Up at the top section here, I can actually do a search by either typing in the last name, a first name, or a login name. So I could quickly do my search. So if I wanted to quickly look at, everybody's last name who started with a W, okay, I can hit search, and then we only have one person that comes up, which happens to be Mike Williams. But if I did, a last name that starts with S, okay, then all the people that have a last name that start with S come up. So Smith, Zempel, so on. And I can break that even further. I could type SMI for Smith and hit search, and then anybody that has the last name starting with SMI will come up. So again, if you need to pull up an individual on your roster or see that that person is on that roster, just quickly go in and type their last name or their first name, and it'll actually bring it up. The other thing that you can do is in the search grid down at the bottom is you can actually sort any of these columns, okay, by just clicking on the column heading. So if I wanted to sort, let's say, this first name column in ascending order, well, if I just click on first name, the first click will actually sort that column in ascending order. The second click will put it in descending order, okay? And I can do that with any column, right? So if I do board agency, we see administration, administrator, governing body, planning board, and so on and so forth. With title, if I do that, I click on it, CFO, councilman, and members, right? So any of these items can actually be sorted by just clicking on the button. Same thing with, we'll talk about FDS files, but if I do that as well too, I can actually sort who's filed and who hasn't filed as well too, so if I want to take a look at that. So again, those are different things that you can do with the columns by sorting and not sorting. So let's do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add a new LGO to your roster, okay? And as you can see in the middle of the screen here, right below your roster, there's a big button that says Add LGO. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on that. And basically what you're going to do is the first step in actually adding somebody to your roster is you're going to put in their first name, their last name, and then there's going to be this PIN number here, which is going to be a system-generated number that gets automatically generated. And we're going to talk about these 3 fields because these are 3 very important fields, and this information is eventually going to have to be relayed over to your LGO. One of the things about the first name is, and it's come up, is, I would use what I consider the person's legal first name. And what I mean by that is you're going to have people like, let's say, and we're going to use the example Elizabeth White, right? But Elizabeth might go by Betty. You're going to have somebody, Michael, Smith, and they go by Mike, or Robert Jones, and they go by Rob. I would put in their full legal name. I'd put Robert, I'd put Michael, I'd put Joseph, I'd put Elizabeth. I would put their full name, even though they might go by a, some type of nickname, because that's the information that you're going to have to give them. If you put in Michael, if you put in Mike Smith and they try to register and they put in the word Michael Smith, it's not going to allow them to register. It's going to say there's going to be no match. So again, I would talk about using full names. So I'm going to put in here Elizabeth White, okay, and that's going to be my first and last name, and then the middle name is not a required field. Anything with a red asterisk here is a required field. Middle name is not a required field. If you have, let's say, multiple people with the same name, but maybe their middle name is different or middle initial is different, then you can either put middle initial, middle name here to distinguish them. Again, it's not a required field. If you don't want to enter it, that's fine. But once I fill in their name, I'm going to click on the Save button right here, okay? And then what that's going to do is you'll see that I'm get a message up in top in green that says LGO saved successfully, and then I have a PIN number that has been created automatically for this LGO, right? So that PIN number, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, is going to be very important. So, but the 3 fields that you're going to need to give the LGO is going to be the first name, the last name, and the PIN number, how you entered that in. Now we move on down to the middle section where we're now going to add positions for this LGO into the system, okay? So basically what we're going to do is we have a category list here, okay? So, does this position fall under an elected official, independent authority, managerial, executive, member, confidential employee, or other, right? So I'm going to add Elizabeth first as an elected official, right? I'm going to say that she's part of the governing body, and she's a council person, right? Now, you'll see also we have two fields here for the term effective date, the from and to. Again, they're not a required field. If you want to enter it in, just so you have that information in the system, and it will come up in some of the search screens as well, too, you can actually enter in. Again, it's not a required field, but if you want to enter it in, you can enter that in. Once I enter that position information in, I'll click on the Save button right here in the position section, okay? And what will happen is it'll give me a message up in top in green that the position has been saved successfully. And down below, under the list of positions held, you'll see that that has been added to the section here, right? Now, at the same time, since I'm still working on Elizabeth White, what I can do is, let's say she has another position within the organization. I can now add that second position in here, okay? So I'm going to say that she's part of the managerial executive staff. She works in administration. And her position held is she's the administrator. Okay? Again, I'm not going to put in any effective dates, but I'm just going to hit Save. And now you'll notice down below that that position has also been added to the system as well, too. So again, you can add as many positions that that person has within your organization. This does not apply to positions that they have outside of your organization, okay? It's only the positions that they have within your organization. If Elizabeth White is, let's say, has a position with another entity, whether it's a JIF or the county, it's going to be their responsibility to add Elizabeth White to their roster. And at that point in time, Elizabeth will get a unique PIN number from that entity. Eventually, these PIN numbers all get tied back to Elizabeth's account when she sets up an account within the system. And we're going to go through that step in a little bit later as I show you how that gets set up. Now, it will be your responsibility to communicate this information to the LGO, their first name, their last name, and their PIN number. A couple of different ways you can do it. We've added a print option at the bottom of the screen here where you can actually click on print. Basically, it'll give you a printout of the screen here. You can just hand that piece of paper to your LGO and give them their information. Or some people ask, can we just email the information to the LGO? You can do that as well, too, okay? It's however you want, whatever the best form of communication for you is, you're more than welcome to use it. But again, like I said, you really just need to give them the first name, the last name, and that PIN number, okay? So that's basically, the three pieces of information that they need. When I'm done with Betty White or Elizabeth White here, and I want to now add another LGO to my roster, all I need to do is click on the Add New LGO button right here. Okay, it'll clear out my screens, and now I can come in here and I can add my next person, my next person to the roster, doing the same steps that we just did before. But if I go back out to my roster, okay, I click on the back button. Now you'll notice on my roster here, okay, that you'll see down here at the bottom or close to the bottom here, Elizabeth White is now on my roster as two different positions, okay. You'll see her PIN number listed here. And then over to the right, you'll see that the FDS file field says no. So real quick, the FDS file field, I'll just touch base on that a little bit, is that once the LGO files an FDS, immediately this column will get updated from a no to a yes. So at any point in time, if you want to come in and you want to kind of review who has filed and who hasn't filed, you can quickly come into your roster and see who has filed and who hasn't filed just by looking at that FDS filed column. If I need to make any changes, let's say there was a change that I needed to make to a particular person, I can click on the Edit button in the Action column, okay, and that will pull up that person. And then there, what I could do is I can go in and edit. Now, let's say, for example, I needed to add another position for Elizabeth White to my organization, okay. I could just, come up here, I can put in the position information, hit Save, and I can actually save the information, okay. I could also delete this entry as well, too, the LGO from my roster. But there is one caveat. If that LGO is filed in FDS, you can't delete them from your, physically delete them from your roster. So one of the questions that came up is, well, what happens next year when, we start our new roster and Elizabeth White is no longer, with the town? She's retired, let's say. Well, then we can actually disable, and then we have the disable box here. We can actually disable her on your roster, and again, she won't be on your active roster at that point in time. So again, we maintain history in the system, so we don't physically delete people from your roster once FDSs are filed, but you can disable them for subsequent rosters, as we go into subsequent years. So let me go back. So now we've added, like I said, we've added Elizabeth White to the roster here. So she's in our list. I can sort this by last name. I put everybody in alphabetical order. And now I'm done. And again, I can keep going and creating my roster. And again, your roster doesn't have to be all done at the same time. You can always log back into the system the next day, later in the day, what have you. Just come back to Manage LGO Roster and just add to your roster. Question has come up over the first couple sessions that we did. Well, what if somebody new starts in the middle of the year in a position that requires them to file an FDS? That's fine. You could just log into the system at that point in time. You add them to the roster, you give them their PIN number, and then they have 30 days to file their FDS, okay? And again, I'm going to go through the process on how they go through when they file their FDS. So again, from creating a roster, it's not that complicated. It's very simple. And now you'll notice that in my stats, I now have five people on my roster, okay? So again, just giving you a quick update on the roster there. So before I go to the next step, which is showing you how an LGO actually gets set up, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to log out here first. I'm going to log in under South Brunswick because I'm going to say that Elizabeth has a position over in South Brunswick as well too. And I'm going to show you how you would tie, or that LGO eventually is going to be able to tie multiple PIN numbers to their account. So again, I'm going to add LGO, and I'm going to type in their name. I'm going to save. And now you'll notice I get a new PIN number. This is different than the PIN number that I had before from Elizabeth because I'm working in South Brunswick right now, okay? And here what I'm going to say is I'm just going to say that this person is on the planning board and they're just a member, right? And then I'll just hit save. And now for the South Brunswick roster, okay, Elizabeth White is listed on there as a member of the planning board. Different PIN number, hasn't filed yet to FDS. So again, I just wanted to put that in just real quick so I have two entities that Elizabeth White belongs to. So let me log out of here for a second. I'm going to go back to my questions because I know we have a bunch of questions. So let's see if there's any way, let's go through the questions here. Okay, do we fill out our own FDS from the administration screen or will we have to set up a separate login? Good question, yes. You'll have to set up a separate login, okay? The email address that you're utilizing for the roster creation and management will have to be different from how you file as an LGO. So you'll need to use a separate email address. And I'll actually expand on that real quick about email addresses because this question has also come up several times. You can, again, it'll be up to you. You can get a second email address from your town if you're using a town email address. There are multiple services out there for free email addresses like Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, where you can just go and create an email address, or you can use your personal email address. It's up to you. I will let you know that, and this question has come up also too, and if Chris wants to expand on it, he can, about is the email address is going to be something that could be brought up through Oprah. The email address is really your username. It's not really something that we're capturing as a separate data element within the system. It's only your username, and we utilize that because they're very unique, okay? So since it's a credential, it's a security credential, we believe that it's not something that could be obtained through Oprah. But Chris, if you just want to expand on that just to give them some additional guidance.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to point out is, as a result of yesterday's sessions, on the screen that you're seeing now where it says login email, we've asked that that actually be changed to username. That way, it's that way we're not communicating to the world that there's an email address attached to this in any way, shape, or form. So I think that might eliminate. Remember, this is the same page that everybody's going to go to. So if somebody, like one of your local gadflies, came to this page now and saw a login email, he or she might get the bright idea to do an OPA request for everybody's email, or some private company might get that idea. So I think by changing that description, we'll eliminate that, at least on the surface. And quite frankly, if we got an OPA request for email addresses, we're not collecting email addresses. We're requiring that you use an email address as a username, and that's all. I don't know how it would shake out because we haven't been down this road before. I don't know how it would shake out if there was a formal complaint or a Government Records Council case. We always encourage local government officers. I mean, I think the division has been doing this for a number of years now, to use business addresses attached to your local government unit, or in this case, to set up a separate email account, one that's not specifically an email address that a local government officer uses day to day, but some other one that can be used as the username, and not so much as an email address for purposes of contact. We're not sending email out from here at this point to anybody with these email addresses. But it is something that would be used in the case of an LGO who forgets their password, let's say. It does have to be a valid email address. It's just little discretion on the LGO's part which one that they want to use.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Another question that came up, does a login name have to be an email address? Yes, the answer is yes. It has to be. That's the format that we're collecting. So, yes, it does have to be an email address for the login name. The question, is it necessary for the county clerk's office to include board of trustee members for the local community college if the board secretary does that?
County colleges are considered a separate local government entity. They are going to be, their president's offices have already been contacted, and many of them have already contacted me with who the contact person should be at that particular college. They're going to be set up where they have to handle their own roster. So the county clerks will not have to worry about the county college roster.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Next question is, does the FDS filed field populate automatically as each person completes and files his or her FDS? The answer is yes. As soon as that FDS is filed and submitted, that column automatically gets updated with yes, which means is in the past or last year, in order for you to be informed that an FDS was filed, the LGOs were getting some type of receipt at the end of the process, and they were coming back to you and handing you off on that receipt. That no longer will need to apply. As soon as the FDS is filed, two things happen. Your roster gets updated automatically as listing that as being filed, and then on the public search site, that FDS is immediately available for public search, and I'll show you that in a little while towards the end as well too. So, so that's how that works. So let me clear that one. Should the PIN be kept confidential? Yes, with any type of security information, I would always keep it confidential. I would just keep it between yourself, the person who's setting up the roster, and the LGO. Just keep those two, between the two of you.
You're going to have to determine how you want to communicate the PIN number to your LGOs. You can, if you have a small number of LGOs, you can do that simply printing the screen and handing it to them. But the one thing we would strongly encourage you not to do is like an email blast to all of them where they all see each other's PIN number. We would strongly discourage that for the reasons that Mark just stated. And while I'm speaking, I want to give everybody the second code word. And again, just to mention that this was automatically generated by an online system. Some of these are a little bizarre, quite frankly, but the second word is Europa, E-U-R-O-P-A. Europa, E-U-R-O-P-A.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay, next question. It says, does Elizabeth White get a separate PIN for each position she holds? For each organization, the PIN will stay the same. For each entity, her PIN will stay the same. So when I set her up for Edison, she had 2 positions within Edison. That PIN number will stay the same for Edison throughout. Even if I set up a new position next year for her, it'll be the same PIN number, okay? But now for South Brunswick, when I set her up in a different entity, that PIN number will be different. So for each entity that they end up on a roster, their PIN number will be different. Now, once that PIN number is associated with their account, they really no longer need that PIN number unless a new position for that entity has been assigned. But usually, they're probably not going to need that PIN number after they associate it with their account. Next question.
And I just want to stress, too, you don't need to worry about the other entity's PIN number being issued to one of your local government officers. You only need to worry about your PIN number, and you can completely ignore the other PIN number that the other entity is going to give.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next question. If one person held 3 positions in 2014 and 2 positions in 2015, do you delete the vacated position for that LGO in 2015? Yeah, I don't think we've gone through that whole scenario yet for next year, but yeah, there's going to be a way for you just to determine the positions that are valid for 2015, whether it's a checkbox or, like I said, we might disable one position. I don't think we've gone through that entire flow yet for next year, but there'll be a way to just distinguish what positions are that apply to that particular year. So, you know, we'll get to that as we move into next year. It says, sorry, please clarify if an official who serves in more than one position for the same town will have multiple PINs. No, one PIN number, and we'll need to file FDS under each PIN. So when I get to set up an LGO in a couple of minutes, you'll see where, when they have multiple PINs, how the system is going to interact with those multiple PINs and how they can actually file their FDS for multiple PINs at the same time. So if you just bear with me for a few minutes, I'm going to show you that whole process in a couple of minutes. Next question, is a sewage authority separate from the borough for this process? The answer will be, and Chris, I believe, the municipality will be responsible for setting up the municipal sewage authority.
Yeah, local authorities like a storage authority or municipal utilities authority, fire districts fall under the municipal roster. A regional authority, on the other hand, is a separate entity, and those people are being contacted separately so they can create their own rosters.
Okay. Good. And then the last question I have here, so if an LGO serves in 2 different towns, they would still need to complete the form twice. Yes and no. It depends when they actually attach the PIN numbers from the towns and they actually file that FDS. There is the ability for them to actually just file the FDS one time for all the different towns that or entities that they're on a roster for. But depending how they go in and at what times they get that PIN number and file, it could be multiple times that they end up filing. But I'm going to show you that process in a few minutes. So just give me 1 second here, and you know we're going to go through that. And let me just answer one question here. Okay, so let's move on. I've answered all my questions. So let's go on to the LGO registration. So on this same login page, you're going to see a link right here in the lower left-hand corner that says New Registration, a Local Government Officer. So I'm going to click on that link, okay? And what this is going to do is this is where the validation comes in of their first name, their last name, and their PIN number. Now, I was put on the roster both for Edison Township and also South Brunswick Township, and I was given 2 different PIN numbers. It doesn't matter which PIN number they put in first. It could be either or. So, you know, if I was given both PIN numbers on the same exact day, it doesn't matter which one I do first to set up the account. I can use either or. But I will need the second PIN number later on after I set up my account initially to actually now add that new PIN number to my account as well too, right? So let's say I come in here and I come down, right, and I put my first name, my last name, and my first PIN number, okay, which was I got from Edison, and I click on Validate PIN, well, what's going to happen is, it says first name, last name, and PIN number didn't match. I put in the first name Beth, right, instead of Elizabeth, right? And you can see that it won't allow them to create an account unless those 3 fields match, okay? So if I just come back here and I correct my first name and put Elizabeth, now I click on Validate PIN. Now it says given PIN has been validated successfully. Now I can continue with the registration. At this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the rest of my information. Okay, and then down below, the LGO is going to create their login. Information, right? So this will be their email address, because again, they'll use their email address for their login as well too. And then I'll put in my password. Okay, so once I fill in all that information, I fill in all my information at the bottom. There's going to be some definitions and instructions, terms and conditions, from the DCA. We're asking that they read through it, and then once they do that, they can click on the I read the definitions and instructions, and they agree to them. And then they can click on the register button at the very bottom. Okay, and I typed in the wrong password. I had a mismatch, so let me try that again. Okay, now let's try registering. There we go. Okay, and at this point in time, what they can do is they can actually print out this information for themselves. Just so they have what their login information is, right? So let me go in now as an LGO. I'm going to actually log into the system. Sorry, I was in caps there. Okay, so I'm going to log in as the LGO, and the LGO screen is going to look very similar to what your screen looked like, but a little bit different, right? So here we're going to see submission years 2014, FDS submission. The submission is pending, right? Nothing has been filed yet. We'll notice that over here where it says File Financial Disclosure Statement, I'm going to be able to click on that and do that. But here is where they can actually go in and look at their positions or manage their positions, right? So right now we see that Edison Township was set up. Once I have that first account or my account set up with that first PIN number, now I can come in here and I can associate all other PIN numbers that I have with my one account. So I don't have to have multiple accounts. I can have one account with multiple positions from different entities, but I'm going to associate each one with. So the question that came up earlier about filing FDS, do they have to file it more than once? If I went in here right now and I clicked on File Financial Disclosure Statement, and I filed my financial disclosure statement, and then a week from now, I came back in and added my South Brunswick PIN number, then I would have to file that financial disclosure statement a second time, okay, because it wasn't filed with the initial positions that I had created in my account. But if I now come in here and I add that second PIN number to my account, let's go here, 1, 2, 8 down, validate PIN, okay. Now that second PIN number and that position has been added to my account, the South Brunswick account position. Now when I file that FDS, it's going to file for all 3 of these positions that I have on my account, okay? So again, depending when they file, we're recommending to the LGOs that they actually wait till they get all their PIN numbers and they associate all their PIN numbers with their account, and then they only have to file their FDS one time within their account, okay? But again, there are times that, let's say I filed my FDS, come mid-year, I'm appointed to some board or whatever, and I'm required to file for that. Well, that's fine. I mean, once that new position is added to the roster, they can come back in here and they can file at that point in time within 30 days of being appointed to that new board. So let me go in and just file this financial disclosure statement real quick. So I'm going to click on that link. Okay, what it's going to do is going to pull some of the information automatically over from the registration screen from the user. They can add additional information if they want, to the system. Remember, only the fields with the red asterisk are required. Okay, so that's the only fields I'll have to fill in. You know, I'll add in here my spouse's name. Okay, and then I go down and I see all the positions that are going to be filed as part of this FDS, right? So I see all 3 positions down there. Okay, and at this point in time, I can either save this or I can click on next. Now I know one of the big things with last year with the system was that the information was not saved within the system. So if somebody was going through their FDS form and they came up to a section and they didn't have all the information available, it basically kind of put them at a standstill. There was no way for them to get out of the system and save all that information, come back in later on and complete the FDS. With this system now, whatever I've completed up to the point of, you know, submission will save in the system. So I can always come back and I can continue this, right? So let's say I don't have a piece of information today. Well, I can save it, and then tomorrow I can log into the system and just pick up right where I left off. I don't have to re-enter everything back into the system. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to click on next here. Right? I'm going to go to the next thing, right? So here's where I need to list my sources of income, right? So I'm going to say Edison Township. And I'm going to say that's for myself, and I'm going to say, I'm going to click on Save, right? So that'll list down as my entity down below, right? It'll list my information. And I can continue to add multiple sources of income here, right? So I can say, you know, let's say South Brunswick Township. Okay. I can hit Save there. Oh, we didn't address. I don't know. I can hit Save there as well too, so list it, and then I'm going to also list my wife as well too here. Right, that's for my spouse, and I'll save, right? So I've listed all my sources of income. So again, once I'm on the screen, I can keep adding multiple entities or entries for this particular section. Now, at any point in time, as the person's going through their entering this information for the FDS, they can always click on the Preview FDS form up here, right? And by doing that, what they'll do is they'll get a pop-up of that actual form, PDF form that they can always review if they want to take a quick look at, you know, how the form is coming along so far, right? So I can kind of see here are my positions listed right here. Down below, here's the sources of income that I've just added to the form, right? So good, it looks good. So now I can click on next and go to the next screen, right? So we're on basically step 3 of 8, right? Here it's going to ask me to list any fees or honorariums. Now, if I don't enter anything in on this screen, I try to hit next, oh, I get a pop-up box. It's going to tell me I got to at least do one of two things. I either have to enter an entry here, okay, and list any sources of fees or honorariums, or if I don't have any, then I need to click on the none box here. Right, so either one has to be, you know, selected in order for me to go on to the next screen, right? So it's not going to allow them to move forward unless either of those are taken care of, right? So then I come to the next, right? This will list any gifts or reimbursement, prepaid expenses, or all that. Again, I don't have anything, right? So I'm going to click on none. I'll go on to next, okay? And at this point in time, right, this is going to ask me to list any business organizations that I might have an interest in or anything like that. Again, I don't have any interest in any organizations. Again, I'll click none. And then we come up to the section where they have to enter in their, you know, any property they might own, okay? Now, let's say I don't have all the information. Let's say I don't have the block and lot numbers right now. Well, like I said, you know, if I go out of here and I get out of this screen, right, and I come back into later on, let's say later in the day, tomorrow, next week, what have you, and I click on File Financial Disclosure Statement, well, everything that I've done up until that point is saved in the system. I'm just going to click on Next and kind of go through the screens, right? You see all my positions are still there. You see I entered none here, none there, right, this screen. Now I'm back to my property screen. And then here is where I can go in and I can, you know, add any you know, property that I have. Now, one of the questions or one of the problems that came up, I believe, last year was, you know, me and my wife jointly own our property, and it's 50% ownership for both of us, right? That seemed to have been a problem last year. So this year, you can actually say, you know, 50%, I'm going to put a self. I'm going to hit Save, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, pick Edison one more time here. All right, there we go. I'm going to say 125 block 1. I'm going to say that's 50% ownership, and that's my spouse, and I'm going to hit save. And then if I own any other property as well, too, I can list that property as well, too, in this section, right? So, again, I can add as many properties as I have. Once I'm done with this section, I'll click on Next. It's going to take me to a comment section, and I can put any comments in, right? So I'll just put any comments. I'll click on Next. And now we're at the last screen. This is the screen that they're going to come to just prior, or where they're going to actually have the ability to submit this FDS. Okay, and at this point in time, what you'll notice here, and I'm just going to show you real quick, I'm just going to circle it real here, right down here where it says Submit Financial Disclosure Statement, right now that is actually grayed out. They cannot physically click on that button right now. Okay, and the reason for that is two things have to be done on this screen. The first thing is we are going to force the person who's filing this FDS, the LGO, to view their financial disclosure form, right? So they'll click on this button here. Again, it's going to come up. It's going to show them their form, right? We're asking that they review it. We know it hasn't been submitted yet because we don't have a date or a time here. I mean, a date or an electronic name signature here, right? But we're asking them to actually review that. And the second thing they need to do is they need to type their name, which is their electronic signature, right? This is how they're going to electronically sign this form. So by clicking on the review button, by typing in their name, now this button is now enabled, and at this point in time I can click on it to submit it. They are going to get a warning message that says, are you sure you want to submit this form today? Because once they submit it, they cannot amend it, they can't supplement, they can't modify, they can't change the form in any manner, okay? So again, once this is actually submitted, this form is done, it's locked down, they can't make any changes to it. So I'm going to hit OK, I'm ready to submit. Okay, it's going to give them a message up at the top that the form has been submitted successfully. It's going to give them an ID number, and we date and timestamp exactly when this form was submitted. Okay, so this information gets logged of when it's submitted. If I go and view the form, the FDS form that I just submitted, what we'll notice on page 2, it now has the date and it has my electronic signature. That lets me know that this form has been electronically signed and submitted. Okay, so as an LGO, I'm done now. Unless, again, I had new positions that, or new PIN numbers that were assigned to me that I haven't filed for. At that point in time, I would just come in, add those new positions to my account, right? Come in here, add the new position, and just refile that form, you know, for that new position. Okay. But what now has happened, let me log out of here. What has happened now is if I go back into my Edison Township roster, you will notice now that for Betty White, or for Elizabeth White, under the FDS file, it now says yes. Okay, so immediately, as soon as that LGO files, okay, that now comes up and is now yes. And if I logged into South Brunswick, if I log into South Brunswick and look at their roster, again, for Elizabeth White, it's going to tell me yes, okay? Because, again, we filed that FDS for all 3 of those positions, the 2 for Edison and the 1 for, you know, South Brunswick, so everything was filed. And then the last thing that happens is, real quick, is on the public search site, right here, I can come and the public can actually go in and search. Now, I can either search by a particular, you know, government entity, like let's say Edison Township, click on search, and I can see all the FDSs that were filed for Edison Township, or I can search by a particular person. So if I was looking for White, okay, is the last name, and hit search, right, then I'll see Elizabeth White actually appears 3 times. 2 positions in Edison Township, 1 for South Brunswick. And then the public, to actually view that, just clicks on the view button, and then they can actually see that FDS that was actually, you know, filed. Okay. If they're doing a search by, let's say, an entity, let's say for Edison, and they want to actually see all the FDSs for the entire town, well, we give them the option to actually select all the checkboxes here. And then down below here, what they have to do is they have to kind of put this, what we call capture message in. But what that will do is give them the ability to actually download all these FDSs in one shot as a PDF, right? So if I open this, you'll see that I have all my FDSs from Edison Township. There's actually 8 pages here, right? I mean, there's 4 different people who filed, but they can actually download all those FDSs in one shot. But the one thing that you'll see now is that the forms are very consistent, okay? You know, from LGO to LGO, right? It's a generated form that has, you know, consistency throughout. So that's how the public would actually go and actually do the public search. But again, once that LGO files and submits that, besides updating your roster immediately, this public site is now available. They can go right to the public site and they can view that, okay? No more having the LGO no longer has to bring a receipt to you, let you know that they filed. It's automatically available there instantaneously. So at this point in time, I'm going to pause. I'm going to go back to the questions.
And Mark, while you're doing that, I'm going to give everybody the third and final code word in case anybody's got to get off the call. The third code word is Greyhound, 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 like Greyhound bus or Greyhound the dog, Greyhound.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so let's go back to the questions. So the first question I have, it says, so the municipal clerk cannot use the official municipal email account to file an FDS because this is the account to set up the roster. Correct. Yes, you will need to use, if you as the municipal clerk has to file an FDS as an LGO, you will have to use a different email address in order to do that. Like I said earlier, you can use a personal email address, or you can get a new email address from, you know, like I said, Gmail, Yahoo, one of those services, and utilize that. Or if your internal IT folks can give you a separate email address to do it, you can use that one as well too. Let me go to the next question. In a municipality, would you review who needs to file? You know, as Chris has said at the conference a couple of weeks ago, it's not your responsibility to make sure that the LGOs file. It's their responsibility. We do give you the ability to go in and look at your roster at any point in time to know who has filed and who hasn't filed. You know, if somebody within your organization, you know, basically as a courtesy, you know, wants to let those LGOs who haven't filed, know that, you know, they haven't yet, that's up to you. But again, I know the DCA stance is it's not your job to babysit them. It's basically their responsibility to file. But you have that information available to you. You know, just by quickly going into your roster, you can sort your roster by who filed and who hasn't filed, and quickly see, you know, who hasn't filed yet. So, next question: what if you add an LGO and they do not need to file? Will the system notify you? We don't recommend adding anybody to your roster who does not need to file. You know, obviously it creates more work for you. It creates more work for the DCA. I know from previous sessions, you know, Chris has said that, you know, there's been entities that have gone in and basically just blanket and just added everybody to their roster. There is guides out there. If you're a municipal clerk, I know a couple people mentioned yesterday at the municipal clerk site, there is a list of all the people who need to file, who the LGOs are and who needs to file. And there's other areas too, I think on the DCA site as well too. There's a list of that as well too. So again, we only recommend that you add to your roster the absolute people who have to file. Okay?
And I'd just like to add to that, that at some point in the coming weeks after this is rolled out, the roster is also going to be available through a search, so that if you have, I mean, if you've swept everybody into this, every one of your municipal employees, including the ones that aren't local government officers, and you've included them on a roster, and somebody in the public sees the roster and then goes and searches for a particular person, like your like a police records clerk, for instance, and doesn't see an FDS for that person, from a technical perspective, a complaint can be filed against that person for not filing, and then we open up the whole can of worms or questions about whether that person is or isn't a local government officer, and there is a standard in the local finance notices that have always been issued by the division. And what happens is you've now put somebody who's potentially or likely not going to be considered a local government officer. And I use the police records clerk as an example because you have many positions locally that are confidential in nature, like a police records clerk, because they're handling sensitive criminal records. But that does not, in and of itself, qualify that person to be a confidential employee for purposes of having to fill out an FDS. I think it's, at least on the surface, pretty clear why there is such a requirement for local government officers to fill these out. And I think when you look at the purpose of that, and you'll realize that not every police records clerk, not every principal clerk typist, and not every human resource office employee is going to be a local government officer just because they're handling confidential records. That's not what the standard is. And all we can really do is encourage you to try to clean your roster up and talk it out with your labor counsel, who should be the person helping you figure out the managerial, executive, and confidential employee aspect, because it's based on PERC standards, public employment relations standards, and that's usually what the labor attorneys do.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Next question says, are the instructions printable and easy to understand? I'm not sure which instructions you're referring to, but I will say that for the system, we are in the process of creating a user manual. We're also going to have a short tutorial for the LGOs, like a video, that will be available for them to actually click on and understand what they need to do. So some of that material is being created right now. If it's instructions that relate to who has to file, I think Chris alluded to it, and we gave a couple of references where you can look at who needs to file, if you're looking for that. Okay, one of the questions came up. Technically, you own both 100%, not 50%. Sorry, I don't file an FDS, so I'm just, kind of using the 50-50 rule. As if that's the case, if it's both 100%, Roy, that's fine. But again, I just wanted to show that in certain areas where you can put percentages or you need to split percentages. I think last year that was an issue on the form. It wasn't something that could either be done or wasn't easy to be done. So I just wanted to show you that within the system you have that ability to do that now. Next question says, what if real property or a new or different source of income occurs after the FDS is submitted? Please be aware that, let's say we'll take 2014. You're submitting in the year 2014, but it's for information that you had for 2013. It relates to your information last year. So, just like you do your taxes, you should have all that information now. Now, to the question where, what if you come across something that you forgot? Unfortunately, once that FDS is filed, it's filed. As I mentioned earlier, that's why we give the warning message to the LGO, letting them know that no amendments or changes can be done after it's filed. So at this point in time, there is no provision just yet on what occurs after that FDS is filed. I mean, there might be something later on to discuss that, but right now, it's just, once it's filed, it's filed. Next question, under property, is it required to list property even if it is not rental property or vacation property? Basically, the home is just in my name. I believe, Chris, you can clarify this, but I think it's all property that the person owns, correct?
Can you state the question again?
Yes. It says, under the property section on the FDS form, is it required to list property even if it's not rental property or vacation property? Basically, the home is just in my name.
The property itself, yeah, that section of the FDS says list the address and a brief description of all real property, which essentially is real estate, in the state of New Jersey in which an interest was held. It doesn't matter that you're not renting the property. What matters is that somewhere along the line there's a deed or some other document that's recorded that's got your name on it as being an owner or having some other interest in that property.
Okay, thanks. Next question says, will you be providing technical assistance or training for individuals filing? Like I said, we will have written documentation and some videos for the LGOs. Those will be available by the time the system goes live. So we are currently working on those right now.
We're not really able to do something like this for the universe of local government officers because there's over 40,000 people that file these things. We wouldn't be able to do a webinar type of program for them, but I think when we present the video for them and the instructions, I think that should help. I want to point out that one of the complaints we got last year through the process was that we tried very hard to be very detail-oriented in the instructions, but we received a lot of criticism for being too detailed because a lot of the people complained that that just made it more complex for them. So it's a matter of trying to strike a balance between how much information is sufficient, how much becomes, you know, overbearing. I can tell everybody this. I've been working on the system myself, testing it for a few weeks now. My feeling is this: you're sitting here watching a webinar, and it could be a little confusing because we're bouncing back and forth from screen to screen. But my experience is, and I think it's going to hold true for you guys, once you get your username and PIN, and you go on, you log in, and you start building your roster, I think you're going to find it very simple to use. And from a local government officer perspective, I think the only thing that is going to require require them to pay more attention is the Manage Positions tool if they have multiple pins. For the average user that just has to fill out one of these, my feeling is, from experience, is that it's harder to buy airline tickets these days with all the things you have to do now to buy an airline ticket online. It's harder to do that than to fill out a financial disclosure statement online.
Okay. We have a couple more questions here. We'll just run through them real quick. Next question, I think, Ann, you said your question was answered, but I'll just, it says, for the annual audit, we have always been required to provide the auditors with an actual signed copy. This past year was a problem, since many did not print out and will not be signed. Again, they're going to be electronic signatures. If your auditors need copies, what I would just do is direct them right to the public site. Yourself, you can actually go in and just pick your municipality and download all them into one PDF and just give that file, have that file given to the auditors. So that would probably be the best thing to do, I would think, in that situation. Let's see here. Hey, Chris, real quick, I do have one of the people on the call who's an acting clerk, so they're not really sure if the information that the DCA has that will be forwarding that information will be sent to them, it looks like. Can you just give out your phone number real quick, and so Corinne can maybe give you a call on that?
609-633-3610.
Okay, and Corinne, if you can call Chris and he can just make sure that you're listed on the information again, because I think they got the information from, was it GovConnect, Chris?
Yeah, when we send anything to the municipal clerks, it's through the GovConnect system. So if we have the proper email addresses in that system, the right person will receive the information. For the other local government entities, we don't have a user role in GovConnect for all of them, so we're trying to build spreadsheets with email so we can start sending out group emails to those entities separately.
Okay. It says, may those officials who do not have an email address use the same email address provided by the municipality for the purpose of filing an FDS? Yes. Yes, they can use their, if they've been given an email address by the municipality, they can utilize that email address to register as an LGO and file their FDS. There's a couple of questions that come up here. They're all a little bit different, but I think they kind of relate. It all goes back to who has to file. And I think Chris has, kind of said there is information out on the DCA site of, who exactly has to file. This was more around the college, like the trustees, president, VP of finance, and so on and so forth. Again, I would just direct you out to the DCA site and look at that documentation that's out there to get a clearer picture on, who needs to file. Same thing with the person who had the question about the admin clerk, court clerk, and so on and so forth with your municipality. I would just double check that documentation as well too, and just make sure it'll clearly state who has to file and who doesn't have to file.
There are many positions out there that we've gotten questions on over the years, whether they are local government officers, and it's very hard for us, unfortunately, to get legal opinions from the Attorney General's office for each of those. What I suggest to the clerks and others who have to do this is, if you want to clean up your roster, start with the low-hanging fruit and work forward from there. And if you try very hard to get the assistance of your labor attorney, and if you can't, and you have some question marks over some of the positions, and you can't get any help from your labor attorney, just document somewhere you know, in an email or something, that you've at least tried to do that, because and then don't lose sleep over it. If you left somebody off, like an administrative clerk somewhere, and you've tried to get assistance from your labor attorney or your municipal attorney, and that just didn't happen, don't lose sleep over it. They're not on the roster. End of story. And if there's a complaint down the road that somebody should be on the roster, the local finance board procedure for that will give you guys the opportunity to fix it at that point. But again, I'd be very hesitant to just sweep everybody into this. I think that's the worst thing we could do, rather than leave a few positions off. I think it's worse to include everybody. Because believe me, we've gotten tons of phone calls and emails from people complaining that they're not LGOs, and our typical response back is, you're on the roster. You need to go back and make a case to your town attorney or whoever's in charge there in terms of giving legal opinions, or talk it out with the clerk. But we can't say you don't file because you're on the roster. And it kind of gets thrown back at you at the end of the day anyway. So it's better to try to resolve it first thing in the morning, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Next question comes up. It says, with the deadline of May 15th, are your recommendations to give the LGOs 30-day notice? We're running up against a tight deadline. When do you expect the instructions to be completed so we can include them when we contact the LGO?
Right now it's May 15th, but the May 15th deadline was based on us having this already rolled out to you guys either the end of last week or the beginning of this week. So that May 15th deadline for the local government officers will ultimately shift based on when we finally give you guys the opportunity to create your rosters. You know, I don't think anybody needs to really worry about the deadline, because it's extending now, and we control being able to grant other extensions. We simply go to the local finance board and we ask them to do that, and they've always been cooperative to do that.
Okay. Next question says, in future years, the LGO could use the username and password from the past years, and the information will be saved and require them only to list the changes. That's correct. Yeah. So one of the advantages of the system is that when they need to file for, let's say, next year, 2015, let's say everything has stayed the same, their positions and all that, they can pull up their FDS that was filed previously. They can modify and make any changes to it, you know, update it with any, you know, current information, and then submit it at that point in time. So again, that's going to be one of the advantages of the system for them in subsequent years. Roy, if you're still on the call, it looks like your message didn't completely come through, your question, so if you could just resubmit that, that would be great. And I think you did down below. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so next question. Will the clerk be afforded time to create the roster before we must notify LGOs of their filing requirements? If the roster is process of being built, will others be able to see the uncompleted roster? You're only going to be able to see the roster. You know, again, we're only giving one username and password to each entity. So whoever has that username and password is controlling the roster and will be able to see the roster at that point in time. Right now,
Mark, that person may have meant once the rosters are put online. That's what I think that person. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. I don't know if we've thought that through at this point. My guess would be that there will be an on and off switch for the rosters to go online, and that it won't be something that is available as you're building it. If that's what you meant when you posed the question.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not entirely sure how that'll shake out. But
yeah, and one of the things is right now on the public search site, we're not listing. I mean, we're only showing what has been filed. We're not showing the roster as a whole of who has it. I know that's a change that eventually will be there. So, like I said, right now, as you're building your roster, only you can actually see your roster right now at this point in time. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next question. So when an LGO fills it out, submits, and then says, oh, I made a mistake, do they start again from scratch, or how do they amend it? Again, they cannot, once it's submitted, it's submitted. They can't make any changes. They can't resubmit another FDS. The only time they can resubmit another FDS is if they were given another PIN number from another entity that they haven't already submitted, and now they need to submit that FDS for the new entity that wasn't previously submitted. but for the one that's already been submitted, it's already there. Now, there has been some talk, and again, it hasn't been clarified yet, that maybe allow changes up until the deadline, but as the system stands as of today, right now, once it's submitted, it's submitted. So that could change. Not sure if it will, but there has been some, suggestions to that fact from other sessions. Is there someone specific we should contact with questions? Again, we will have on the website once it goes live, if you have any problems, who the contacts will be. We haven't ironed out all that information just yet, but once the system goes live, there will be information on the website for you to utilize to contact in case you run into any problems.
We're going to use a single phone number, and what's going to happen is that phone is going to be answered by one of the clerical employees in the local finance board, and she is going to hear what the question is, and then she's going to transfer the call to one of about 8 of us who have been trained on this and who can answer the technical questions or the more policy-oriented perhaps types of questions, or take comments and stuff. But there's about 8 of us internally that in moving forward for the next 6 to 8 weeks that are going to take the phone calls and answer questions.
Okay. And 2 other questions we have right here. We'll try to get through them. It says, we have many board members who do not use computers, therefore do not have emails. This will cause some problems. Maybe next year this should be taken into consideration. What we've kind of said is that, those LGOs, they're part of your organization. You could allow them to sit at one of your computers within the, let's say, organization and, complete that. Now, for an email address, like I said, we have listed several ways to get a free email, whether it's with, Yahoo, Google, Gmail, what have you. And then the other thing is, Chris has said is that, most of these, let's say, older folks who might have a hard time or who have never done this before, obviously they have, hopefully children, son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, friend that can actually help them and get them online. Don't want to say this is the wave of the future, but this is how most things are going now. And like I said, there's various sources and ways that person can file that FDS online, with help, from various sources. So again, that's kind of how the system was designed to make it easier for everybody. The next question: should the LGL use a municipal email and not their private? I was thinking you probably meant LGO. Again, if that municipal email is already being used as the LGE email, okay, for you to manage your roster, you're not going to be able to use that same email address. You will have to use a different email address. If you don't want to use a private email and your town can give you another, or that person at LGO, a township email address, that's fine. They can utilize that. That's not a problem. Okay. So what is the helpline? What is the helpline phone number? Again, we haven't come up with that yet. That will be published on the live site once it goes live. Okay, please explain again the difference between the disable button and the delete button on the roster. Okay, the delete button is if I created an LGO, let's say I put them on the roster today, and I found out that that position or that person doesn't really need to file an FDS, then I can physically just delete them literally out of the system, okay? But let's say next year that person is on the roster and they're no longer going to need to file, okay? Then I can disable that person. That's basically removing them from next year's roster. So that's what the disable button does. Once a person files an FDS, that delete button, you're not going to actually be able to delete them, okay? So once an FDS is filed, you won't be able to delete them. So basically that button will go away. Can the clerk assign another staff member email address as the LGE email address for the roster? As of right now, no. It's going to be the email address that is coming from that the DCA has. We are talking about possibly that changing, but that change has not been implemented yet. We do know, especially going from year to year, clerks do change, people do change. But right now, we're basically utilizing that one email address that can't be changed right now. The password can be changed, but the email address cannot be changed at this point in time. So Just
so remember, it's being used as a username. It's not being used as an email address. So let's just say hypothetically that you have an email address that you've created, municipal clerk, municipal clerk, tomsriver@gmail.com. When you're using that as a username for purposes of the system, just assign it a different password. If you're concerned about staff having the main password for that email account, just give it a different password because it's not being used as an email address in the FDS system. So you just have to kind of distinguish that in your mind. The email addresses that we're using to communicate to you are simply from the GovConnect system. And we're using that to create the initial account. So if we have your standard clerk's office address in the GovConnect system, and that's what we're using to create the account, just assign it a different password, and I think that should eliminate any concerns that you might have. And going forward, down the road, we'll have the ability to change that username. We just can't do it right now because there's 900 of these, so it's going to be too difficult for us to take special requests for different usernames.
Okay. Next question, real quick. Chris, where can the individuals get the form to apply for CEUs? Is that on the DCA site?
Yeah. First of all, if you got the GovConnect notice from yesterday morning, the link is right on there. If you didn't get the GovConnect notice, what you can do is go to the Division of Local Government Services website, and then you want to go to the professional certification link, and like 3/4 of the way down on that page, you'll see the Word document. It's called Individual Continuing Education Agreement. It's the same form that you would use, let's say, if you were in Pennsylvania and you took a course that had not been pre-approved for any of our credits, and you said to yourself, well, gee, I think I should be able to get some New Jersey CEUs for this. That would be the form that you would use to request that from the certification unit. We're using that form because we got a request from a clerk a couple days ago who asked if there were credits, and quite frankly, we hadn't thought of that. So we pulled the credit thing together pretty quick, so we weren't able to print up certificates or anything. So Dan Kaminsky, the certification manager, thought this would be the easiest form to use.
Okay. Next question that came up, it says, can't there be an option added for clerks to select administrator or LGO? The state gives us the opportunity to select when logging in to the pension system as employer or an active employee. Lizette, I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with that system, so I don't know how that system works. So I don't know if Chris, if you know that or not, but
no, but I can partially answer the question this way. This system is built essentially on the same platform, I guess is the word for it, as the Artemis system. I'm not sure what system the pension people are using, but we have some limitations on what we can do with this system because it's already a platform that's been built and designed for Artemis. It's a matter of us having taken it and tried to build the FDS stuff into it. So we'll check if that's a feature that's available or could be done. But I don't anticipate that's something that's going to happen for this year.
Yeah, and just remember, everybody that's still on the call, this is this year is the first year for this system. Obviously, we're going to get recommendations from users as people start to use the system, enhancement requests, and we'll take those into consideration for next year. We'll see where the the problems occurred or what have you. So we'll, like I said, we'll take them all in and we'll evaluate them kind of after the process has been gone through. And wherever we can tweak the system and make it more user-friendly, we're more than willing to do that. It's just we need to get this launched and off the ground. If people keep coming back now with all these changes, we'll never get it off the ground, right? So at some point in time, we basically just have to get it launched and people start using it, and then work on the feedback from there. So just bear that in mind. Next question, it says, no, the issuance is the FDS process will be assigned to a subordinate, but the clerk's address is being used. Antoinette, I don't know if you were answering somebody else there. I don't really understand the question, so if you need to rephrase that or if it was just a response to somebody else, okay, no problem, okay, fine. And then the last question I have here, can a person included on the roster in error be deleted once the roster goes public, even if that person has not filed. Can a person included in the roster in error be deleted once the roster goes public? Like right now, we don't have the option of putting the roster as public right now, but if that person hasn't filed and they're on your roster, you should be able to delete them. You know, like I said, we haven't made that public option available yet for the entire roster, so that's not a concern at this point, but it'll be something we'll consider. You know, obviously, it'll be a question that'll come up as we do, you know, look at doing that. So. But yeah, if they haven't filed an FDS, they can absolutely be removed from your roster, you know, at any point in time. So, okay, so that's the last. Well, sorry, I was going to say that was the last. One question came up. For elected and appointed LGOs, the term beginning and term end dates are not required fields. What will they be used for? Good question. They do appear in a couple sections. Initially. Well, on the FDS, there is a field that the LGO needs to put in for their term. Initially, we were going to have the clerks and everybody else who's managing the rosters fill out all that information, but it was determined that you might not have that information readily available, and it's actually the LGO's responsibility to fill that information in. Right now, we are working on clarifying where that change is going to be for the LGO if we're going to make it as part of their process. So it's something that hasn't been finalized as of yet. But again, you can put that information in more for your own information. Some of the reports later on that you're going to be able to produce out of the system, you can kind of see that information on there. So in case you want to see who's expiring and so on and so forth, that information will be on there. But as of right now, that's kind of why the fields were put there. The initial thought was, the clerks or the people managing the rosters would fill out that information. But after some discussion, we've kind of said, we're not going to force that on the person who's managing the roster. It's really the LGO's responsibility to do that. So we're kind of working, through that particular scenario right now.
But just to add, if you do complete that beginning date and end date, it will be imported into the financial disclosure statement itself for that particular LGO. If you leave that blank, then it will remain blank on the financial disclosure statement, at least for this year.
Yep. One more question came in. It says, if we receive an OPA request, are we required to provide a paper copy or refer them to the website? No, refer them to the website. The public website is there. The information is available as soon as that LGO submits that FDS. So I would just refer anybody that comes in with an OPA request right to the public website. Okay. And I believe you don't need to, because you're not gathering. The LGOs aren't giving you or don't have to give you a copy of the FDS. So there's no requirement for you to actually keep that paper copy. Oh, but you mentioned the roster. To confirm, are we no longer required to keep a paper copy of the roster? You have the roster online. We're going to provide you with a report. So if for some reason you need to print off the roster, you're going to have that ability to actually print off the roster right from the system. So again, if you get eventually what we're hoping to do is publish the roster online along with the FDSs. So that person can go both online to get a copy of the FDS and a copy of the roster. But until we have that option, we do have a report in the system that if somebody does come in with an OPA request, you can actually produce a roster out of the system. Let me see if there's any other questions here. I think that's it so far. We'll leave the webinar open for another couple of minutes. So if anybody else has any additional questions, feel free to ask them before we end it. Like I said, we are recording this. We have recorded the several sessions so far. We just need to find a place and communicate with you once they're up and running on a hosted site, so you guys can go back and review them if you want. So at this point in time, again, I don't see any other questions coming. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I think we're very excited, for this new system. I think you're going to find it, very intuitive, a lot easier to use once you go through that learning curve, and then, we'll go from there. So let's see here. No more questions so far. Just a couple thank yous. Oh, here's a question. Will the OPA request include personal information from the individuals that are inquiring about it. Not
You say, read that again?
Yeah, it says, will the Oprah request include personal information from the individuals that are inquiring about it?
We've done nothing to change what the Oprah request form should look like. So if you have a person that's requesting something and you've adopted an Oprah form, we've done nothing to change that. So I don't know what information you're gathering from those people. In terms of what is available to the public from the search, it's simply the FDS. It's the same financial disclosure statement information as in the past. So to the extent that somebody puts optional information on their financial disclosure statement, like a home address or a phone number, that will be public. But that's not something new this year. It's been the case all along. And it is a typical type of phone call that we get. Somebody realizes they put their phone number down and they decided they don't want that available. The problem, this year as in last year, is once you submit that form online and it's got the optional information, we're not removing it. It's a public record. It's a document. We're not removing it. And it's also a matter of time and attention. We don't have the ability to go in and start removing phone numbers for hundreds of people who decide it wasn't a good idea to have their home phone number. LGOs need to just take a little bit more responsibility. It's a 2-page form. It's not overly complicated. They just need to read the instructions. It says optional right on it, and just not include it if they don't want it. It should be as simple as that. Nothing's changed from that last year to this year, or from last year to the year prior in that regard.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So, okay. Again, I think we've answered all the questions that have come in. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And, again, if anything comes up, once the system goes live, there will be information on the live system on, if you run into any problems, who to contact. Obviously, there's going to be questions that would be related to the DCA in regard to the process and so on and so forth. If there's any technical questions, eventually those would be related to Sunrise. But we'll work through this. And again, I think it's just going to be overall, it's going to be better for everybody as we move forward. So again, thanks everybody. And I will be ending this webinar in a few seconds. So have a great day and hope to talk to everybody soon. Thank you.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, Chris.
I can send this in an email if you want, and just let me know. But one thing I noticed when we were doing the FDS, Section 1 is still importing the optional information.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what happened on that is I think when I filled out the FDS, Chris, I think I didn't remove it from my form. So you know what we'll do is later when we do this afternoon session, when I fill out the FDS form, what I'll do is I'll remove it because I think I left it on there because it's pulling from their registration information, like their address.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't blank it out. I didn't remove it. So
okay.
Let's just try that later when we do this afternoon session. And
all right.
Just remind me. Yeah.
All right.
So, okay, I'm gonna end this now.